My name is Moises Gonzales, and my professional discipline is in urban design. I like to say my discipline is skateboarding and snowboarding, and my professional discipline is in urban design. This is where I center my work. It's also related aspects of it in historic preservation through my work in traditional cultural landscape communities, in land grant acequia-based communities. I also, in terms, I'm really interested in vernacular architecture and planning.
Can you talk a little bit about, your history with the state? Did you grow up here? And can you talk a little bit about how you arrived into your discipline of planning?
So I'd say where I'm from is Carnuen, New Mexico. My mom's from Abiquiu, or roots to Abiquiu in the Rio Chama Valley, I would say. And then my dad was in the Air Force, met my mom. And then early on, my grandpa was a rancher, but also was a member of the Cement Masons Union. And so he worked on big projects like Hoover Dam, the Gorge Bridge. I mean, public works, he did it all. And so after my dad got out of the Air Force, was in the New Mexico Tacos, the Air Guard unit here. He started working on base as also for the union. Then eventually he got his contractor's license. And so his big deal was started out as he would do adobe restorations or adobe construction. So I grew up at a young age working on restorations in Old Town and Corrales and Santa Fe. So to me, that's what got me into the built environment, but also what related to that in terms of land grant and acequia communities. I grew up, my grandma was really involved in the dances in the East Mountains, such as the Matachina. She had a big role. Although I grew up in Atrisco, went to Chaparral, West Mesa, actually for a little bit, Emmanuel Lutheran, got in trouble in APS, got kicked out for a little bit. And then graduated from West Mesa High School. And I think probably drawing back to my dad, working with my dad and understanding construction was a big, I grew up young age doing carpentry and cement finishing and then also I think being a skateboarder. I mean, growing up in this town, we would, after weekends, I'd help my grandparents on their ranch. And then my friends would take the bus all the way up Central from Atrisco, and we would skateboard all the kind of like gritty Route 66 hotels, all the way down to downtown. I grew up skating this got kicked out of this campus many times growing up for skateboarding. This is before the skateboarding days. So I think between growing up in the built environment, as meaning like working for my dad in construction, being engaged with the acequia and land grant community as a young age, with my grandparents, and then also I think just exploring. I think if we think about it, like the shadow spaces of planning and architecture are the unseen spaces, but they are the places that skateboarders actually reinterpret architecture and the built environment. And so to me, I got really intrigued about urban space.
One of the reasons we're here today is to honor you as the Community Engagement Research Lecturer Award winner for this year. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to kind of talk about what that means to you and your professional career.
Well, first of all, to me, I think scholars, we get into our research, we get really into our interests. And I thought about it, when I got the award, I was like, well, they're going to have I'm going to get asked at some point, what is community engaged scholarship? It's doing your scholarship, is doing your interest and your passion. But if you're going to really partnership in co-production, I call it the co-production of knowledge, because you come into a community with your expertise, but you partner with community, and the community has knowledge, and there's problems, and there's things they want to solve, and the community comes through it from iterations of reciprocity of trying to solve community problems. So you can't come in as an expert, right? And I think ultimately, if I had to define how do you step into the work of community engaged scholarship, is it's consciousness minus the ego equals community engaged scholarship. That's how you have to start. That's how you engage in the process, right? Because if you have the consciousness that you're the consciousness of the community and your consciousness engaging with the community, and you leave your ego out, then as a scholar you can start you can at least co-produce the methodologies in relationship with the community, that you're going to, first of all, you're going to accept, you're going to understand that knowledge, and you're not going to step in with ego. And once you have the idea of co-production, so let's reword that. Consciousness minus ego equals community engaged scholarship. That is the co-production of knowledge.
It does create a question that I had in my mind about, being at a Research One university, we as academics are asked to produce research in very traditional ways. And you have, definitely authored some books. And you've also probably had a variety of publications that are related to your work. In terms of your career, can you talk about maybe a publication, a book that you feel really has impacted you personally and potentially the communities that you work with?
So I'm going to direct to one specific publication, and then one book chapter in particular. I've authored, co-authored publications through uh, 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 my mentor, one of my mentors. We can talk into mentors. That's going to be, when I do my lecture, I'll get into that. Um, Co-authored publication through funding through the National Science Foundation through with partnership with as a co-PI with Dr. Jose Rivera on acequias. I've authored stuff on cultural landscapes. I've done peer review articles on land grants and vernacular architecture. One publication book that the that I have a chapter in. It was a book on Querencia. And I wrote my chapter related to the land grants on Genízaro communities. And the reason you think we talk about querencia, which is at the basic term is querencia is like love of place of and where are you from? And ultimately, like I say, I'm from Conway or I'm from here or whatever. It ultimately means like who claims you? You claim that, but ultimately, how does the community claim you? And I was working on a summer urban design studio, and we were working on the historic plaza restoration preservation plan for the Pueblo of Abiquiu, which I also have my querencia to. And we pretty early on, we decided that querencia could be a methodology. So we started saying, okay, well, how does that methodology work? And so we started mapping out all the natural resources. Before we even get to the plaza, we started interviewing community, and we had this idea of querencia. And then my students started making this connection of maps through this series of mappings and these series of interviews and diagrams that my students were making. It was like this aha moment. We had this conversation where we were saying, okay, we have a natural system, we have a built system that, based on legal frameworks, and then we had, adaptation, and then all the social systems, the rituals, dances. When we mapped it out, I was, wow, Querencia is a place. It's about community, it's about people, and it's all the intertwined threading of these relationships that maintains a cultural landscape. Therefore, once we created that and got into that, then we could figure out, well, restoration of plazas based on community reciprocity from all the actors and community members. And then I went on to write that chapter based on my own community in Carnway, and it was mind blowing. When I went to apply that methodology in my community, then I could actually say, that's when I started looking at querencia as a methodology, not just as what we call in our work as a value of a value based in community for organizing and preserving place. Then to me, the aha moment was this is a methodology. And to write that chapter, that's like, and now ever since that, it was a major shift in my work.
You've been here for probably as long as I have, maybe even longer. And I think you and I have a shared colleague mentor in Teresa Cordova.
Yes.
And you've overtaken the research center for Raza planning, and I just wanted to know like what that meant to your work and potentially moving that agenda forward. Is that something you're still interested in doing? And
yes, absolutely. So you were director after Teresa, and Teresa Cordova, now the director of the Great Cities Institute, University of Illinois, Chicago, where she still provides a lot of resource to, in terms of to my students, to myself, probably to you for collaboration and with the Great Cities Institute. So for me, I think that's where my passion and my community engaged scholarship started when I landed as an assistant professor and working with you you and I were able to get through the National Endowment of the Arts. We've had a couple of grants that we were able to do some really good work in the International District, as well as Los Lunas for the Cultural Museum there. And so for me, the Resource Center for Raza Planning was kind of centered and allowed me to do some of the work. Some of the McCune grants that was funded, the National Endowment of the Arts grants that we were able to receive, launched a lot of my community engaged scholarship that is very important to me. Since then, I just coming out of serving as chair. I was interim chair of the Department of Community Regional Planning, interim chair for 1 year, and then chair for 3 years. And now just moving back into my role of research and engagement. So I'm looking forward to going back and collaborating with you more in your role of director of historic preservation as well, kind of rethinking about what the role of the Resource Center for Raza Planning, which primarily was research and technical assistance for Chicano Mexicano communities of New Mexico and the border towns. But even thinking of how does it relate to Latin America? How do we think about architecture and planning in kind of the Americas, and broadening that relationship or that work? And so that's where I'm looking forward in my next iteration of my work. And how do I, honored to receive this award, but how do we, as a college or a school, collaborate with the university? And how do we, as my role with the School of Architecture and Planning in partnership with the University of New Mexico, how do we broaden our impact in the state? And how do we do that, not just through the state, primarily the state, and then after that, how do we make those connections into Mexico and Latin America?
I think you've had a legacy here at the university, and as you start to look at the future, and I'm dealing with the same thing in terms of like what is next, and how do we impart our wisdom onto the next generation? And just curious about some thoughts that you might have about where you might be heading with your own work, and potentially being a Latino in a Hispanic serving state that you have great influence, and how do you impart that into the next generation, and what is it that you foresee for the future?
I think most importantly, it's in our roles, it's about mentoring faculty, mentoring I feel like, we're both full professors. We've been here a while, and I think it's our role in our leadership at the School of Architecture, but not only School of Architecture, but the institution. Being this institution is the flagship university and R1 institution in the state of New Mexico. So I feel, and I say "our" because I situate you and some of our great colleagues like Francisco Vina and Levi Romero just retired. Was a great mentor and collaborator of both of us. I think our mentorship to students in high school in the state of New Mexico, in terms of how we can engage them to participate and become practitioners of the built and environment and the natural and the cultural landscape. So we have to put our work into mentoring students and how do they get back into their communities? How do we leave a long-lasting impact in our scholarship? So I feel my trajectory is much more in the role of serving community and pushing my kind of the next evolution of my work in cultural landscape. And as that work relates to preservation and resilience of community from both a form of not just a physical form, but community capacity. And so, yeah, it's how we going to mentor the next generation of practitioners in our fields, and how are we going to collaborate with the next generation of leaders, and how are we going to forge and continue to forge the legacy of not just mine, yours, or our legacy, but the legacy of the School of Architecture and Planning, which we're celebrating 50 years. This is so it's a great time and moment to reflect. I feel very honored that I was able to get this award during our 50-year commemoration of the school, because it's a question we have to ask ourselves and continue our mission. My name is Moises Gonzales, and my professional discipline is in urban design.